Hello, folks. I thought I'd do an impromptu live stream. Let me know if this mic is going well. This is thanks to Warren Dent, who sent it over. This room's a little echoey. It's going to remain a little echoey because it's a big empty space. And there was this David French article that I wanted to dissect. It's kind of long. I haven't read it. I just scrolled down. I'm like, oh God, this is going to be interminable. Let me just give you guys a little bit of updates about the Anarchist Handbook. So this is the hardcover, and Amazon is refusing to release it. And how Amazon works with Amazon Publishing is if your book is Kindle or paperback, you have to go through an approval process that's independent of each other. So once the Kindle was cleared quickly, but then the paperbacks were giving me a headache. This was back in May. They just unleashed a new hardcover division. This is what they would look like. And I had two author copies sent so I could see what it would look like. And they said, no, you can't do this because readers will be confused because the text is similar to this other book by Murray Rothbard. And I go, it's similar because it's the same. And here's the Rothbard estate, the Mises Institute, give me permission to reprint it in here. And they go, nope, it's too confusing. So it is banned from publication on Amazon as a hardcover. And part of me wants to make a stink. And then part of me is like, you know what, if I make a stink, are they going to pull the paperback and the Kindle too? Now there's a tiny part of me that's worried about Audible, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. We're getting that mastered right now, and I'm still doing the very fancy deluxe signed hardcovers, which should be out for Christmas, and those will be available only at malice.locals.com. There's going to be 2,500 of them, which should be enough for all the supporters over at malice.locals.com. So one of the it's really kind of funny. So something that when you kind of are even have a small platform, sometimes you'll make there's a few sayings of mine that have caught on, whatever. And I've had people argue with me, well, you didn't really think of that. They just think these ideas just come out of nowhere, or it's not a big deal that you thought of it. It's an obvious thing. Well, yeah, every good idea many good ideas seem obvious in retrospect. Thank you. It hurts my heart. A lot of good ideas seem obvious in retrospect, but someone still had to think about them. And it's not exactly like, inventing fire, but it's a little thing that you did that you created. So people give me shit about this. This is really funny. Like, I was the one who reignited this whole conversation about national divorce in 2016 in the zeitgeist. I didn't think of the idea of secession. There was a Civil War, of course. Before the Civil War, they were discussing it. The North was going to succeed. I did not invent the American Revolution was secession. But it was a dead letter. And then I started talking about it. Then Jesse Kelly started talking about it. And I'm shocked because now we're at the point where cathedral outlets are covering it with a straight face. They are polling on it. This is an issue that is being discussed with any sort of semblance of seriousness, as opposed to rolling their eyes and we're going to pretend this isn't a thing. So I am delighted that this is being taken seriously much, much faster than I expected. Much, much faster than I expected. So let's talk about this article. I'm already dreading it because I know it's going to be long. So let's dive right into it. So here's the thing about David French. I've never interacted with him. I met his wife briefly in a green room. She seemed to be a very lovely woman. I know a lot of people have a very poor opinion of him. I don't think that is going to add anything to this discussion. I haven't read the piece, but I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt, take it in good faith. I've never seen an interview with him. I don't really know him that well. I think a lot of his takes are really, really bad, but he doesn't come off to me, from my very limited exposure to him, as like a complete pompous ass like myself or Tom Nichols, for example. But he is going to give the cathedral conservative, corporate conservative perspective, which their role, intentionally or not, whether consciously or not, is to validate basically the status quo and the regime and say it just needs tweaks, but we shouldn't change the system at all. So let's talk about that now. So here he goes. He goes, the headline is "A Whiff of Civil War in the Air." Now, that's a complete lie. First of all, there's a lot of people who claim if there's a national divorce, it has to be a civil war. War is almost always optional. And there's many counterexamples of this. Number one, the collapse of the Soviet Union. There was no bloodshed. Ceausescu got shot, but there's very little bloodshed there. First of all, it's also not the same that if a war happens, that means the war is going to be long and bloody. Kuwait. The Kuwait War was very brief and bloodless, relatively bloodless, thank God. The Civil War, American Civil War, did not have to play out the way it did. At a certain point, I forget what the battle, is it Gettysburg? I'm sorry, I'm not a Civil War historian. But at a certain point, the South were able to march on Washington and capture the White House, and they decided to respect national sovereignty. But if they had gone there and captured the president, it certainly would have played out very, very differently. So those are two. Brexit is an example of secession. Now they're like, oh, well, who's going to take Chicago? What's going to happen with Texas? These are very complicated issues. But here's another complicated issue. So part of the UK, you have Northern Ireland, which is part of the United Kingdom, of course. Then you have Ireland. And the border between them, this is the Troubles. This was a huge terrorist situation, blood on both sides, Sunday, Bloody Sunday. It's just an ugly, ugly mess. And this was the big question. If you leave the EU, and Ireland wants to be part of the EU, and the UK does not, what happens to that border between Northern Ireland and Ireland? Is it going to be reintroduced? And this was a tricky situation. It's still up in the air to some extent. No one's killing anyone. No one killed anyone when Czechoslovakia split in half. Now, it's possible that it would get violent, but the idea that it's certain it's going to get violent is absolutely untrue. So right away, it's like, okay, why do you want to kill people who just want to leave you? And let's just talk about regular divorce. The claim that every divorce ends in murder or violence, divorces are very ugly. They're very traumatic. No one argues about this. But are you really going to say that like every divorce or every conflict leads to violence, especially when both have nukes? That doesn't make sense to me at all. So let's start talking about this. So he talks about there's a poll. He says, the verbiage here. The University of Virginia released polling results that should shock exactly no one who closely follows American politics and culture. A majority of Trump voters, 52%, and a strong minority of Biden voters, 41%, strongly or somewhat agree it's time to split the country. Why would they even contemplate taking such a drastic step? The poll provides answers that are not surprising. Competing partisans loathe each other and view the opposition as an existential threat. Okay, I think this is inaccurate. I don't think that it is a partisan issue. I think it is a cultural issue. So there are at very least two cultures in this country. There have been more than two cultures since the beginning. They've been held together with staples and glue. And there are good reasons, but there's plenty of reasons why this should not continue. So it's very clear that culturally, this is the confusion people have. Because two or more populations speak the same language, English, that therefore they should be one nation, that doesn't make any sense. This one found, okay. He goes, a majority of Biden voters falsely see no real difference between Republicans and fascists. A strong majority of Trump voters falsely believe there is no real difference between Democrats and socialists. Okay. When this poll tracked better than many others is that the mutual loathing is based more on emotion than policy. It's neither. It's culture. It's a worldview. It's a perspective. This idea that like, even if it is based on emotion, let's just talk about emotion. If you have two populations that have the same policies, but they hate each other, why are they in a country together? It's like, oh, too bad your feelings are wrong. Well, these are my feelings. I want to live in the same country as you. I don't even need an explanation. In fact, the poll found that majorities of Trump voters expressed support for most elements of the Biden infrastructure and reconciliation plan. Even the least popular plank garnered 42% from those who voted for Trump. Is anyone with a straight face? This is just insane or untrue. Does anyone with a straight face think that the sticking point between Team Red and Team Blue is the infrastructure bill? Like, I don't know any conservatives or people on the right who think that the big issue with Biden is the infrastructure bill. I've never heard this be a complaint. So yeah, of course they agree, but that's a complete irrelevancy. Broad consensus on the most important legislation now pending in Washington didn't stop 80% of Biden voters and 84% of Trump voters from viewing the opposing party as a clear and present threat to democracy. The threat to democracy is democracy. It's the idea that I have my values and my preferences, and I can't get them because for some reason my neighbors think differently. That's the issue here. Democracy makes no sense, and the only reason that we even consider as a hypothesis is because we're trained to the contrary since kindergarten. Okay, what else? We've seen it time and again. The combination of malice and misinformation is driving American polarization to a fever pitch. While there are real differences between the political parties, a fundamental reality of American politics that voters hate or fear the opposing side because they've mistaken beliefs about their opponents. But that's another big issue. If he's saying that the two political parties are in large agreement, that is a big part of the issue. That a huge percentage of the population doesn't feel represented in Washington at all. And if that's the case, why should they recognize their authority or be part of that country? It's like, okay, you want to choose, David, and I don't begrudge him this. You want to choose between the Republicans and Democrats, fine. What do you say to all those people who say, I hate both those parties, neither of them represent me, they agree with each other far more than they agree with me? If it's 80% of the people polled agree, let's suppose. So those 20% of people are just like, tough shit, suck it up, let them go. Other polls have found that Americans substantially exaggerate the extent in which members of the other party dehumanize, dislike, and disagree with them. In addition, Democrats and Republicans imagine almost twice as many of their opponents as reality, hold views that are extreme. Okay, this perception gap gets worse with increased education and media consumption. Last week, Washington Post, blah, blah, blah. Said the guy named Robert Kagan, I don't know him. Kagan persuasively argued that America was set for an electoral confrontation that could lead to the greatest political and constitutional crisis since Civil War, with a reasonable chance over the next 3 to 4 years of incidents of mass violence. I love this. I love this. There's a chance that in the next 3 or 4 years, there'd be mass violence. What happened last year? What the hell is he talking about? There's a chance that there'll be mass violence, a breakdown of federal authority, and the division of country into warring red and blue enclaves. Absolutely. He's not wrong, and the reason he's not wrong is hidden in an undiscussed paragraph deep in the essay. He says, the banal normalcy of the great majority of Trump supporters has befuddled many observers. Although private militia groups and white supremacists played an attack, 90% of those who were arrested or charged had no charges to such groups. The majority were middle class and middle-aged. 40% were business owners or white-collar workers. They came mostly from purple, not red counties. That's the thing. So if this is exactly why they want the divorce. Because if you're a regular person and you're being told in the media with a straight face that you are a white supremacist or a militia group, why would you want to be part of a nation where that is the narrative? Where you're called a Klansman just because you don't like what's going on in Washington. It makes no sense. He says most Trump supporters are good parents, good neighbors, and solid members. French agrees. He says, they think I'm a complete normal person, a responsible citizen who never protests anything, and even I can see the existential threat of the left. You can't? What's wrong with you? Moreover, they are absolutely positively passive polygraph convinced that they're saving democracy, not destroying it. Okay. The cycle works a bit like this. Malice and disdain make a person vulnerable to misinformation. See, the thing with calling things misinformation is that you are implicitly setting yourself up as the person who speaks truth. And it is very hard for me with a straight face to look at the corporate press, or for most people, and think they're being honest, or at worst mistaken. Misinformation then builds more malice and disdain and enhances the commercial demand for more misinformation, rinse and repeat. Moreover, there are different kinds of misinformation. There's blunt lying, which is rampant online. There's deception by omission and by exaggerated hyperbole. Great. He has an example, whatever, fine, we're going to skip that. Two Americas more fundamentally divided than before the Civil War, exaggeration, hyperbole. Once you open your eyes to hyperbole, you see it constantly. On Friday, for example, the left side of my Twitter feed burned up with retweets of Dinesh D'Souza. He says, I can understand the argument that mainstream commentators have overestimated the severity of January 6th, but I can't understand this. And Dinesh is saying that history will view January 6th at America's Tiananmen Square. And he goes, the right side of my feed kept retweeting Rolling Stone. I can understand the argument that Biden infrastructure plans are unbalanced, better designed to combat climate change than the alternative, but I cannot understand this. Oh, and this is Jeff Goodall from the Rolling Stone saying, unless Manchin changes position dramatically, he'll be remembered as the man who, when the moment decision came, chose to condemn virtually every living creature on earth to a hellish future of suffering, hardship, and death. Okay, here's the thing. If you have, let's suppose there's two sides in politics. I don't agree with that. But let's suppose there's two sides. If one side says the other is extreme, whatever that means, and the other side says the other is extreme, they could both be right, or they could both be wrong, or one can be right, or the other could be right. All four of those are possible. The claim, this stupid binary equality thing, that if one side does it and the other side does it, assuming there's two sides, that they're both wrong or they're both right, is a logical fallacy. If a husband and a wife are having an argument, if she's wrote a compliment to her coworker and he's sleeping with his coworker, they're not the same. Okay, I've written about all this before. I even wrote a book about it. Divided We Fall came out a year ago last week. Present a simple argument that America's strongest forces were driving America apart, and if we did not arrest the trend, the future unity of the country could not be guaranteed. True. I don't understand. He has not to this point given a reason why this would be a bad thing. He's taking it for granted that we should all continue as a nation. Just because something has been happening for a long time, it's not the best reason to continue doing something. I don't think most people would agree with that. I don't think that's a very bold claim. The trends are abundantly clear that warnings of political coups, rising hatred, and civil strife appear in virtually every publication. Secession talk has moved from the fringe to the mainstream with alarming speed. Yep, that's true. So he's being fair. I think this is well written and fair so far. There's something else that's going on. With rising hatred, I'm seeing a rise in a purely destructive spirit, especially on the right. The fight becomes everything. The destruction of the elite is the object. Yeah, he's true. That's true. There's a famous French Revolution maxim that declares one does not make an omelet without breaking eggs. That maxim has served as a shorthand warning against utopianism ever since. How is it utopian, or even implicitly utopian, to say, yeah, I don't want to be governed by Washington. I want to be governed by Austin or Sacramento or Montpelier, whatever it's the capital of Vermont is. I think it's Montpelier. How's that utopian? It's just saying Brexit's not utopian. No one said if we have Brexit, Britain is going to have the British Empire again. They just said, you know what, this will be better for us. It's immediate. So first he's claiming that everyone's saying the other's too extreme. And then he's saying, well, the people who disagree with me are utopian radicals. They're not utopian. They just do not regard the elite as having their values. What if it's not an omelet? What if the movement is simply about breaking eggs? What if fighting isn't a means to an end, but rather the end itself? He talks about Jonah Goldberg, okay? GOP Senate candidate J.D. Vance went on Tucker Carlson and said, why are we allowing the companies to receive tax preferences. Why don't we seize the assets of the Ford Foundation, tax their assets to give to people who've had their lives destroyed by the radical open borders agenda? If we take Vance seriously, consider the sheer destruction of his proposal. To make it happen, you'd have to demolish the First Amendment, ramp up state power. There's no common good or social justice in the process. It's tribalism, me and mine versus you and yours. But okay, why is I'm not for tribalism, but why is tribalism bad? Or even not inevitable. If your tribe hates Ford and doesn't want to be in a country with Ford, what is the problem there? Why? If we're not supposed to take Vance seriously, that presents a whole set of competing problems. It represents the continued descent of our political class into what Jonah calls the Parliament of Pundits, a collection of people who exist less to set policy than to whip up anger and rage online. If you don't think Washington represents you because you think both parties are the same, why would you be advocating about policy as opposed to trying to tear down the system? Like that, isn't that a perfectly logical thing to be like, hey, oh, this is Warren. He's the one who sent me this mic. Thank you. Use the mic like you do on Lex and Rogan. I don't know what that means. Am I doing it wrong? I don't know what that means. I had to figure out how to do this whole arm by myself, which is not easy for a person of Semitic descent, let me assure you. So, okay. It is important to understand there's no policy fix for malice and misinformation. There's no 5-point plan for national harmony. Popular policies don't unite us, and there's always differences to help renew our rage. We're dealing with a spiritual and moral sickness. Malice and disdain are conditions of the soul. This is just religious claptrap. It's not a reason. Hey, I don't want to be in the same country with you. Your soul is diseased. What? What does that mean? Misinformation, deception are sinful symptoms of fearful and or hateful hearts. What misinformation? He doesn't even give one example of misinformation. One of the great tragedies of our time is that a nation oppressed by malice and misinformation, he just keeps using this term over and over like a mantra, should be ready to receive a Christian message of love and truth. It's exactly now that a healthy church could be a beacon in darkness. Yet is that truly the Christian presence in our political culture? He talks about the ninth commandment, you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. Okay, I'm going to skip that. The vast numbers of the Christian coalition do not even try. To them, there's a hidden politics exception to virtually every relevant command. Here's the other thing. I'm confused on the issue of abortion. Frankly, I think my position is just not mentioning it because I'm not a woman and it's not something I'm particularly informed about, right? But if there's a big population that says that regards abortion as murder, right? And there's a big population that champions abortion and think it's a woman's empowerment and control of her own body. Why should they be in the same country? Who's misinformed here? Each would say the other is completely misinformed. Why do they have to be locked together? I do not pretend for one moment that there aren't significant differences between left and right, but our system was built from the ground up to channel political differences through a constitution designed to protect the fundamental human rights of both winners and losers, majorities and minorities, including minorities of one. But it hasn't been working that way, or people certainly don't feel that way. So why are they going to hold fealty to the Constitution? So long as these constitutional guarantees last, the Second Amendment, the First Amendment says that you have the right to peaceably assemble. I think I'm the only one who brought out how all the lockdowns broke the First Amendment. They don't even pretend to acknowledge it. Peace, it's not except for in emergencies, not except for a plague. You have the right to peacefully assemble. No one brings it up. So this idea that the Bill of Rights is effective is nonsensical, or at least even if people just perceive it that way. So long as these constitutional guarantees last, the stakes of our political dispute should never grow as high as to necessitate the rupture of our national union. And if we want social peace in a time when false accusations of socialism and fascism echo across the land, then telling the truth of our opponents is the most fundamental necessary start. But why? He didn't give a single reason why we, whoever we are, should be in the same country as our opponents. There's not even, he doesn't pretend to give a reason here. I can't believe this. Wow. There's nothing here. Okay, hold on. Okay, he says one thing. He's a quote from his book. Our nation should be a nation that sustains and nurtures an increasing variety of parties. It should protect a legal system and culture that in turn protects a variety of sects dispersed over the entire face. But he goes, okay, Just as we won't make our way through the wilderness by exaggerating disagreement, we can't minimize our differences either. The path forward isn't through a squishy moderation, a healthy pluralism that allows Americans to bring their authentic selves into the public square. Why am I interested in my public self when I could live how I want privately? I'm really disappointed with this article. I thought there'd be more meat here for me to tear apart. And it's very well written and it's fair, but I'm not even seeing a single reason. Like, here are the big reasons I've heard against national divorce. China is going to invade. It's going to be bloody. It doesn't separate out well because the issue isn't really red versus blue, but so much as, the states are really red states with blue metropolises. That's how so you can't separate out. These are very fair arguments against national divorce. He doesn't bring up any of them. He just says it's not right to say your opponents are fascist and or socialists. We agree on more than we don't. But you can have a marriage and be like, you know what? I like you, but this isn't working for us. I wish you well. So there's not much meat there. I guess I should have read it first. I'm sorry to disappoint, but that's it. There's really there's no, and it's funny because Brian Stelter retweeted it and he said, this is the most important article you read all week, or something to that effect. I don't want to misquote him, but it's like, what's important about it? The article just says a lot of people are talking about national divorce. It's become mainstream, and that it's not fair to say the opponents are extremists. Okay, that's nice. I mean, the same way how, like, like New York City and Long Island, those are different cultures. They get along fine, but they're not the same thing. So, right. So I guess that was it. Sorry, I don't have a more analysis, but there doesn't seem too much meat there. And I think it was to his credit that he wasn't being particularly derisive or snide or being like, oh, because the big argument is like, oh, if you guys leave, your country will be ruined and you're going to come crawling back. But you don't mean that. It's not that concern trolling. It's like if when the guy's beating the wife, and it's like, if you leave the house, you're never going to find somebody else. No one will ever love you as much as me, baby. So I guess I'll take some questions now. What you need to, okay, audiobook soon. I need motivation to get out and exercise. Yes, we are mastering the audiobook right now. It is done. So it's going to happen anytime, any minute now. So it's going to be absolutely great. I'm very, very excited. I also, just in terms of the article, it's like a big issue, which isn't really right or left. It's like lockdown policy and masks. There are two different approaches. Should the individual take responsibility and higher risk, or less responsibility and lower risk? You can make very valid arguments for both. I don't want to be in the country with the other one. Now what? Can we divide the country into 3 pieces so us anarchists can live in peace? Yeah, I don't get it. I don't understand. I don't know who this would persuade. I think he's trying to say that the radicals are delusion, are getting the wrong idea because of social media. Things aren't as divided as we think. And there's people online who are increasing the division for whatever reason that are just making it worse. But he's presuming that which he's trying to prove, that divorce is a bad thing. Like, he hasn't given me a reason why. We agree a lot with Canada. Our cultures are fairly similar. Should we unify with them? So what do you think the post-severance relationship would be between the new countries? It would entirely depend on how it went down. That's exact. I mean, would there be? I mean, look at the North and South. I mean, is it going to be amiable? Is it not? So, I think that's the stuck inside with COVID. Thanks for breaking up the boredom with this stream. You are welcome. Oh, by the way, I've left Gas Digital. I'm on podcast 1 starting this week with You're Welcome. I think new episodes are going to start dropping Wednesday. I've already recorded the first one with Dr. Deborah So, which was a lot of fun. She was a great sport. Yeah, that was interesting that he kept saying malice. I don't think it was a subtweeting me or whatever the equivalent is. Instead of breaking apart, what are your thoughts on allowing free cities similar to what happened to the Holy Roman Empire? I think that would be ideal. It honestly would make more sense if New York City had 2 senators and those number of House members, and New York State had different, because they're different cultures. That would make and Chicago versus Illinois. That would politically, in terms of representation, that would make a lot more sense. I think most people would agree that that is how the division really works. And population-wise, you would have similar numbers. That's my opinion. National divorce between rural and urban city secedes. Thoughts? I mean, yeah, I just said that. I think that's really much more organic. To frame it from the Sun Tzu perspective, Sun Tzu says the object of war is to defeat your opponents in their minds, keeping heaven intact. Yes, if heaven's intact, they can defeat us. Yeah, I'm disappointed in Mr. French. Close to 50% of Alberta wants to leave Canada. Could we see a North American divorce with states and provinces realigning? I sure hope not. You no Canadians. We've got enough. No, that's not true. There's a few Canadians. Michaela moved here. Dr. Jordan can move here. A few others. I'm glad you did stream today. It's great to hear from you. Brian should retweet this milk toast article with no self-awareness of his role. Yeah. Should I start calling Reason Magazine CNN libertarians? Because that is the CNN version of what libertarianism is, right? Are you going to continue episodes with Dave now that you're on podcast one? I sure hope so. Dave is having a personal situation. It's not my place to say he's okay. I wanted him on, but he's having drama. That is absolutely my top priority. Well, not top, but I mean, it's very something that would mean a lot to me, and I very much want that to happen. And I'm fairly sure Dave wants that as well. The top experts on infectious diseases argue that lockdowns and masks were more risky, but were ridiculed by the cathedral. Here's the other one. Just you don't have to know anything about science or infectious disease. If social distancing worked or had a point, why aren't we bringing it back now with the Delta variant? And if it didn't work, why did we do it to begin with? And who made those decisions? And why have they been removed from the decision-making process? This is it's a logical question. There's nothing to do with anti-vax or whatever. Ask people this, their brains will shut down. What do you think the chances are of a civil war? I think they're much lower than people think. I don't know how any war plays out. It could be very, 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 very ugly. Hold on a sec. Oof. Okay, here come the super chats. Could the blue state country defend itself militarily? Seems like we'd be ripe for invasion. If you read the Anarchist Handbook, I point out there's lots of countries that don't have a military at all. And the idea that they're just going to be invaded overnight is not accurate at all, because there is a world community who are there. His job it is to keep the peace. Kuwait was a good example. It's not Kuwait had oil, and there's other situations of that. But the claim that some small island gets invaded, that everyone on the earth is just all the other big military on earth are just going, whatever, because this is a good excuse for those militaries to justify their military budgets. So they're itching for a chance to be the white knight. And also, if America has 350 million people, right? Canada's 30 million. No one's invading Canada. So if America got split, let's suppose 250 and 100, what, a nation of 100 million people is ripe for invasion? That's how many countries have 100 million people? Very, very few. Russia doesn't have that, I don't believe. And also geographically, it's huge. Would a national divorce give more power to corporate oligarchs? That's certainly a possibility. It's absolutely a possibility. I don't have an answer one way or another. You can see it playing out either way. Thank you, sir. That's a good tie. In my personal research, mutual separation has greater international support over unilateral secession unless a national power supports the secession movement. That is 100% true. This was the case of the Civil War, because is Britain going to recognize the Confederacy as its own country? If internationally people are like, okay, this is going forward, then it would stick much easier. This was in the Great Barrington Declaration. I'm not familiar with that. Are we caught up? Okay. Oh, hold on. Where are they? So there's so many of you guys. I'm sorry. I'm going to try to catch up. From an anarchist perspective, how do you feel about borders, open or closed? I am more of this is how I would frame it, because it's not really open borders, because you come here, you get all sorts of government things. I would rather have 300 more people here from Mexico than 300 more Harvard graduates. And if you even including higher rates of crime. Off topic, but thank you for writing to your reader. Oof, that was a tough ending for you, huh? I'm guessing. Excited. Oh, Fume, they're coming over with me to Podcast One. I love their product, and I'm glad to be able to promote them. As an Appalachian, if national divorce happens, can we go our own way? We need a break from all of you. That's the thing. Like, I always talk about national divorce in terms of two countries. It's not at all the case that it has to be two. It could very easily be five or however many. Quick question. What are your thoughts on the role the U.S. nuclear arsenal will play in secession? Yeah, this was an issue with the Soviet Union, like securing those nukes. I don't think it would play much of a role at all. I don't think if there was another civil war that things would get nuclear. I don't see that happening whatsoever. And because you had the moralistic issue with slavery to justify Sherman's watch on Georgia, excuse me. I don't know that you'd have that here. They would try to do it, but who knows how it'll play out. But I think that is something that would not be an issue per se. Who controls the nuclear weapons inside the territory seized from the Union? They would be the respective governments. What if, instead of attempting separation at the regional level, we just built a parallel system? Well, I mean, we kind of have that because, different states defy the federal. A good example of this is drug legalization, marijuana decriminalization. Every drug law is in violation of the federal law. Every time someone does marijuana, I think Colorado legalized shrooms. That's in blatant defiance of federal law, but the feds don't have the willpower or whatever it is to enforce it. But I think this is if it got big enough, they would do something about it, is the issue, in my opinion. Are we caught up? Hold on. How are your nieces doing? They are doing wonderfully well. I haven't talked to them in a minute, but they're doing great. How do you maintain relationships with blue pill people when the perceptions about life are so different? I don't know that I have any blue pilled friends, but I don't have any normie friends because I have an unusual career. I think when you're talking to a blue pilled person, especially at work, you just have to smile and nod a lot and be very aware of how they perceive you. And just, there's no real point in arguing with them. And you have to stop thinking about them as a fellow, someone who's capable of critical thought. Doesn't make them a bad person. You're just having unfair expectations for them. And you don't need to be talking about politics to everybody. I struggle with anarchism's answers to public parks and protection of the oceans. Any thoughts? Well, public parks is an easy one. Oceans is a tough one. And I don't think there's any easy answer for the oceans at all in any system. Unrelated stream topic. Do you think neoliberal elites tolerate ANCOM types despite the fact they hate them as much as the why? Oh, that's easy. They serve some purposes. First of all, they like that they create violence, which drives leftists into corporate liberal arms. There's a part of them that enjoys the radicalism. It finds them, and there's also because they're not a threat, so they're kind of quaint. You don't want to show your force unless you have to, because then the mask drops a lot, and that alienates a lot of people. There are still sovereign city-states that exist today. San Marino, Vatican City, both surrounded by Italy. Could it happen in the U.S.? Vermont was a republic for a brief period. There's no reason it couldn't happen. And it happened. Like Bermuda, I think, is a U.S. protectorate. Puerto Rico is basically it's. I don't know if it's a city-state, but it's small. And what do you call it? Rhode Island. How big is Rhode Island? They're not as small as those, but yeah. Okay, let's go here. Sorry, guys. Your sound quality is excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you, Warren. Good. So the sound issue has been solved. I'm going to get my camera fixed. The movers stole the arm to the camera, so I have to reassemble it. But this camera is fairly decent. Thank you, Randy, for the camera, by the way. Still crowdfunding the graphic novel? No, I haven't started on that. That's going to be next. You're not familiar with the Great Barrington Debate because the cathedral buried it. The top experts on the planet authored it. Okay, thank you. If the U.S. separates in some ways their concerns over what China would do, would they take advantage of the situation? If so, how? This is amazing. They would take advantage of the situation. That's not a question. But this has been an issue for everyone in Russia was raised being told explicitly and believing, they really believe this. The Americans are coming, the Americans are coming, the Americans are coming, they're going to come and kill us all. They're told this in North Korea every day, that but for the leader, Kim Jong-un currently, if he goes away, Americans are going to invade tomorrow and kill us all. And they have reason. They can look at the Korean War. Our country was completely devastated. So they're not completely talking out of their ass. So that is absolutely a concern. I think my bigger concern is how pro-China subtly many elements of the corporate press are. I think it's harder for China to have control over two nations than one. And I don't think the entirety of our foreign policy has to be about reacting to China. How would the country get split? Would it be vertically or horizontally? If we're worried about how, then the battle's won. Do you know what I mean? It's like, first, let's get everyone agreed that this needs to happen. Was the Enlightenment a net negative for humanity? Absolutely, 1,000% not. Have you found a good barbershop? Yeah, I found a decent one. I've only gotten one haircut since I've been here. Do you believe AOC and far left would have right-leaning people murdered for thought crimes? No, I don't. I don't think AOC is a Stalinist type, deep down, or even on top. I don't see it at all. I don't see the bloodlust in her like you see in like some of these other figures. Wokeism has an almost religious sense of inevitable victory. Would they agree to separate countries unless they were on the verge of defeat? Wokeism's strength is largely overrated, in my opinion. The 2020 election was the corporate Democrats stealing the nomination from the woke left. We just saw it recently again when Bernie Sanders, I think, campaign manager, whoever she was, I forget her name, was running for a House seat and she got primaried by some rando corporate Democrat. So it is powerful in terms of the corporate press and it gives it a religious and moral element. But in terms of even the Democratic Party, its power is out of proportion. It just seems, not that it doesn't exist, and it's certainly the case, the issues with education, that's where it's a problem. But in terms of Nancy Pelosi's not woke. Like, she doesn't give a shit about any of this stuff. And it's going to, if you look at Mitch McConnell, do you really think Mitch McConnell cares about the budget deficit? It's kind of like that. These people are gangsters. Okay. I think I remember you saying Washington censored speech in his presidency. Is it true? Can't find anything about that. No, it's John Adams. Look up the Sedition Acts, which put people in jail for criticizing the government. This was under the Adams administration. Okay. I hate the state. Good. Government wants to pay me over 100 grand, benefits, tuition, security clearance for engineering, 6-year contract, take job or no. I don't know you. I don't know your circumstances. I would not, in good conscience, ever work for the government, like, because it's tax money. But I can see a reason why you would. I love you more. Do you think the fall of the US dollar could be the spark for national divorce? No, I don't. I think if there's like an economic collapse, that would actually tend to bring people together. Do you have thoughts on Biden's appointment of a socialist manager of the banks? Not particularly. I wouldn't be surprised if that's where he's going. He's texting me. Okay. You said before you really aren't sure how secession will play out in the United States. Do you know anyone that has some theories that make sense to you? You don't need an expert. Just sit down and think for yourself how it could play out. There's but there's dozens of ways this could play out. It could be as simple as Texas declares its independence and everyone is like, screw them, let them go. There's a million ways. I don't think you can understand David French without reading the article, What Happened to David French by Esther O'Reilly. Alt-right broke him. I don't think that article was at all hysterical in tone or, freaking out. It seemed very calm and reasoned, but just there was no meat to it. I was hoping for more I could kind of critique. Facebook's DNS records were literally altered. Facebook has been deleted from the internet, not a DNS attack, removal of code. Holy crap. Well, I'm sure everything's backed up. If Stelter says the article is important, splitting must be bad for CNN and pals. Is that because it's unnerving or because it strengthens us? Well, it's bad because the cathedral and cathedral operatives, of which CNN is a prime exemplar, need a monopoly on the microphone to maintain their power. So this is why they hate Fox News. Fox News to them is out of control, because as long as there's even one alternative voice, then it's very hard to say everyone should be in this one house, because if some people are going to drift away, even if just out of being contrarians. So this is a big concern for them. Any thoughts on the growing faction in the liberty movement, ecotropism, post-libertarianism? I'm not familiar with, let me look that up. It sounds terrible. I hate these words like that, these neologisms. Ecotropism. No results found. No results found on the whole internet. You've invented a new word. Great work. No wonder I haven't heard of it. Would you agree with that? The internet and national divorce would not be possible. It would be 90% less of a discussion. With the internet, would say Silicon Valley would be the first to separate from the union? No. I think it would be much more likely to be like a Texas or a Florida. How do you decide what book to read next? Oh, I don't know. I have a list of my books that I have on my shelf on Goodreads, and I want the next book I read to be different from the one I just finished, I guess. I'm saddened you weren't featured in the documentary, The Monopoly on Violence. Have you seen it? I don't think I have. I'm not a big documentary person, surprisingly. Let me see this. New York Film Festival. This is getting bad reviews. Oh, academics. What's academics? Oh, Kinsella's in there, Napolitano. Okay. Huh. I'm not familiar with this. Let's see who's in it. Kinsella, Jeff Dice, Thad Russell, Scott Horton, Michael Humer, Dave Smith, David Friedman. Wow, Pete Quinones, Murray Rothbard, Tom Woods. That's so interesting. I'm not in here. Maj, Lynn Albrecht. Huh. Wow. Who is this guy? Chris Kofer. I don't know him. Did I block him on Twitter or something? Nope, I don't know who he is. Oh, well. Do you think Texas is turning more blue? No. Not particularly. Remember, Texas was blue. Lyndon Johnson and Richards. Texas was blue for a long time. And not blue in the sense of conservative Democrats. They were pretty left. Does secession require declaration? I think it would have to be a formal process for sure. What are your thoughts on anarchist Catalonia? How could future anarchist societies avoid its mistakes? I'm not very familiar with anarchist Catalonia at all. Obviously, it was a short-lived. It was the longest anarchist, like contemporary times situation. My camera gets blurry. How could future anarchist societies avoid its mistakes? That's a long and complicated question, but certainly be more aware of the degree to which there would be opposition. If the federal government gets violent, will the people be shocked or enjoy the snuff film? It would be a mix. There's a lot of people who'd be put off, and a lot of people who'd be like, yeah, those people had it coming. Look at blood sports. People love it. Would be great to have dinner with the... You're awesome. Would be great to have dinner with the ladies and great conversation. What ladies? I don't understand. Did I miss something? What ladies? I'm going to bounce in 10. Okay. How do you think the COVID regime realistically ends, or does it not? I think it's going to end in violence at some country, and then all the politicians are going to say, well, we're just going to have to live with COVID. Unfortunately, that's how I think it's going to happen. Do you plan on going on with Viva and Barnes? I'm so swamped, it's not even funny. Are you familiar with highly respected Daily Caller Scott Greer questioning national divorce and proposing national ghosting? I am not familiar with that argument. I think that's a funny phrasing of it. Oh, Okay, perfect. I got my redirect. Okay. Yeah. Okay. 1 second. I've got my. Do you need artists for a graphic novel? I'm not looking for one right now at all. What's the best new ice cream flavor you've tried? I haven't tried any good ones recently. There's a cream cheese one at Baskin Robbins now, which sounds horrible. I didn't even bother to try it. I like trying weird ice cream. I was like, oh my God. I mean, I am just so. Have you read The Sovereign Individual? I bought the first edition in '97, so I've been on top of this for a long time. It is true that all nation states eventually fail, but doesn't mean it's going to fail after 200 years or 400 years or 500 years, you know? Do you know much about the anarchist group, the Japanese government secret killed after the earthquake in the 20s? I do not. Thank you for bringing that to my attention, though. That is very interesting. Okay, I am going to. Oh God. Okay, come on. Okay. You think in a country with a great 50% divorce rate, this would be a more tolerable idea? Divorce was best for both my parents, and the kids turned out fine. I don't know. I heard one of those sons. There's something really wrong with him. What are your thoughts on Christopher Hitchens, particularly his description of North Korea? I'm a big fan of his, or a medium fan of his. I haven't read his description of North Korea at all, so I'm not familiar. I'm sorry. Let's all just buy boats and be free and happy in the ocean problem solved. Seasteading. This has been an argument for a long time. Thanks for introducing me to anarchism. You are welcome. Yeah. After a while, conservatism, you're like, how would I even think this? Because you didn't have an alternative. Who is David French? Nancy French's husband. Are you familiar with the fitness influencer on Abby on Instagram? Oh, I'm not. That's a great username for her. I can't look her up. Wait, Instagram is just literally just Abby. Maybe I'll do a cached version of her. Abby Rao, I guess you're talking about. She's got 2.3 million. Can I see a cached version of this? No, I can't see it. How do you think they would respond to the secession states no longer paying federal taxes? Would they use the surrounding states' National Guard? It depends. If secession is allowed, or if it gets violent. I mean, how is the EU responding to Brexit? Britain not, paying EU fees. And the big argument, that's the other big argument. Like, if the red states leave, their economies will be destroyed because you get more from the federal government than you take in. So you should want to stay. It's like, do you really? It's okay. So you should wish them well, right? You should wish them well. They're going to suffer the consequence of their stupidity. Kick them out. Abby Pollock. Okay, let me look her up. 689,000 followers. That's amazing. That's amazing. Here she is on Twitter. Abby Pollock fit. 4,000. Oh, she's very fit. Good for her. Huh, she doesn't follow me though. Wait, this is old. Wait, this is an old Twitter. It's not really her, I don't think. Let me see. She seems annoying. But more power to her. Okay, I am going to head out. I hope you enjoyed this. I'm sorry there wasn't more to it. I will see you at your welcome later this week. And I will hopefully have more news about the audiobook in the very, very near future. Talk soon, guys.